This is an examination of the hidden human condition.
This is the Hidden Killers Podcast
with Tony Bruschi.
We are talking with former prosecutor Laurie Gilbertson, now with Tribeca Blue Consulting. Laurie, one of the things in the Kohberger case that a lot of people are talking about is the sheer amount of evidence that needs to be gone through between now and October 2nd, which is the trial date. And I say that in quotes. I'm curious to get your insights on that. One of the big things they're talking about is the massive amount of terabytes. I believe it's like 70-some terabytes of information that they need to go through. I know it sounds like a lot on the surface. When I heard that, my thought process was, well, that's a lot of security camera footage because it's easy to rack up terabytes of data with HD video. It really doesn't take all that much to get to that number. People are comparing it to pages, though, which is not going to be that many pages on the computer. What, if anything, do you feel about the timetable that they have here for the trial starting and the amount of information that they have to go through in discovery?
It is in a bit, look, I just don't think there is any way there's this case, a case of this magnitude, a case of this importance, and a case of this complexity, and a case with, like you said, all of this data evidence and other evidence is ever going to trial in October. There's just not even enough time to prepare witnesses before then, to prepare, exhibits, and to go through all of this. Meanwhile, there have to be motions filed. I am sure the prosecution will have some. I am sure the defense will have some. There may be evidentiary hearings based on those motions. So there's a lot to be done before something can actually go to trial. And yes, it does sound like a lot of data, but in this particular case, as we've seen from the police work that led to Bryan Kohberger being apprehended, they seem to do a really good job in a fairly quick time frame of going through that kind of data. So that doesn't seem to be a huge concern. This is the kind of case where the prosecution and the police department are working together, where they're going to have the manpower they need to get through that kind of data in the time when they need it.
Let's talk about what we've learned a little bit more about his personality. A new video came out not that long ago. Have you seen the traffic stop video where he went through the red light?
I have seen stills from it, but not the whole video. So fill me in and let's talk.
Yeah, it's an interesting one where he gets pulled over. The officer lets them know, hey, you know why I pulled you over? And because he was sitting in the middle of an intersection waiting to turn right or left, I believe left. And then the light turned red and then he was able to go. And that is considered running a red light in Idaho. And the whole time he continues to respectfully, I will say, argue with the officer and kind of make a point of ignorance of, well, in Pennsylvania, where I'm from, that's what you do. What should have I been doing here? But very much consistently his own narrative to the story, not really accepting, the authority that says this is illegal. That's why I pulled you over. But this is why I did it. And never, kind of narcissistically showing I'm right, you're wrong. But, I'll listen to you. I'll talk. It's just an interesting look at the way he communicates and the way he thinks when confronted with some sort of conflict that he may be guilty of.
Yeah, advocating for himself, and even under a traffic stop where he's obviously committed the crime or the infraction that the officer is telling him he's done, he's still advocating for himself there and basically saying, like you said, I'm right and you're wrong.
Yeah.
It's interesting, Tony. I think we're going to because we're not necessarily going to hear from him, and his attorney is certainly going to make sure we don't hear anything from him to the extent that they can. It's really just a matter of, I think, all of us who want to know more about the psyche of someone who could commit these crimes, or possibly allegedly commit these crimes. We are just starting to kind of dig through all these very interesting pieces that can reveal something about his personality. So that traffic stop is just one piece of that puzzle that we can kind of put together to get a real picture of who he is. I think some of the other ones, I've read quite a bit about people in his classes, other students who he was a teaching advisor for, and all of these kind of daily interactions that under ordinary circumstances we wouldn't think anything of. But now that he's, basically a alleged mass murderer sitting in jail, we want to know everything.
We do.
And that traffic stop certainly gives you some great video to look at, to really see this person, look at him, and then think that is, allegedly the person who, went and committed these absolutely, heinous and horrific acts. And how is that person sitting at a traffic stop that same person who could go and do this? And I think you and I have talked about that quite a bit, like that whole nature of evil. How is this person who's kind of just talking to the police officer, maybe even a little narcissistic, can then do the stalking, take a knife, kill these people, clean it up, hide the evidence, and just move forward. And it's just this whole idea of piecing all this together and kind of getting over the disbelief that, these things really happen and people really do them.
I'm almost beginning to wonder, obviously the crimes that he committed were not similar to BTK by any means, but it almost seems early on what we know about him where he was doing research. How do you feel when you committed the crime? And all of the questions he was pointing out there. And also obviously studying under the woman who wrote the book about BTK and spent much time with him. I'm starting to wonder if this is something, he got on the ride and he knew where it was going, if he did in fact commit these crimes and wanted to take this ride into, or eventually knew he'd take this ride through the criminal justice system. And at some points, it feels like he's almost trying to emulate BTK to a certain extent. Maybe it's someone he looks up to. I'm not sure. The thing that stood out initially was the fact that he didn't enter the plea. BTK did the exact same thing. Eventually came back in court, very matter-of-factly, laid out every single thing he did in great detail with no real emotion. And what we've seen with Kohberger, he's already said, we've seen in his writings that he doesn't feel emotion. He has very difficult time trying to understand those sort of things and relate to other people empathetically. I'm very much starting to wonder if there is something going on here now where it's an homage or it's following in the footsteps of someone like BTK. Another kind of silly one I noticed just the other day is, everybody refers to Bryan Kohberger online as BK. You're one letter away from BTK with BK. I don't know. Do you ever see that in criminals where they try to emulate or homage to someone that has come before them that's done horrible things, maybe not the exact same crime, but then start to act in those sort of ways?
I did not see that,
Nope.
Really in the cases that I prosecuted. The only places that I might have seen just a bit of it were more in some organized crime prosecutions,
Sure.
where it was very much just a part of doing business. Getting caught sometimes is just that part of doing business. Where it's less of an homage than just this is the playbook we go by.
Okay.
And this is how we do things. I had a defendant after I prosecuted him on an organized crime case and he was convicted, asked his lawyer to tell me that, I did a really good job prosecuting him. And he hopes the next time he gets caught, maybe we can meet again. I mean, it's just...
Yeah. The way of life.
It's just the playbook.
Yeah.
Just life, right? It's just the cost of doing business. And so, to analogize that a bit to Bryan Kohberger here, maybe like you said, this is the ride he was going on. Mm-hmm. This is the business he wanted to get into. And he did his training. He got his experience. He found, the best place to do his research. And then he went off to get his own experience doing it. And that may very well be part of the story the prosecution decides to tell. And when if they do end up going to trial, and there's not a plea in this case, they will be diving into his psyche. They will be diving into all of these things that we're talking about here and really curating it into the story with the themes that make the most sense and are most supported by the evidence to present to the jury. And that, should that day happen, that is going to be really interesting.
This is an examination of the hidden human condition
This is the Hidden Killers Podcast.
with Tony Bruschi.
Laurie Gilbertson with Tribeca Blue Consulting. She's a former prosecutor. Thank you so much for your insight. As always, Laurie, love having you on. We love having you listen to the show. I'd love it if you got the ad-free version of the show because, you'll just like it better. You can sign up through Apple Podcasts right now, become a premium subscriber. You'll get access to this show and all of our shows, all of our podcasts within the True Crime Today family when you sign up through Apple Podcasts. Just go to your player right there, and you can see the place to sign up for the premium subscription. Everything ad-free, binge away, non-stop on all of our podcasts. Do check that out. My name is Tony Bruschi. Stay with us.